Hey y'all, Rob here with ATX Legal, and here's part one of the DWI guide, and we're just going to start with the arrest. So there are 3 stages to a DWI investigation, but I actually start before that because for every DWI there's usually some reason that the person caught the police's attention. So are they speeding? Are they swerving? Did they get into an accident? Some people fall asleep in their car and that starts a DWI investigation. So there's always a reason, and the police have to have probable cause to make a stop. And a lot of times that minor traffic violation, the speeding, the blowing through a stop sign, whatever it is, that's the reason the police have to start the investigation. So at that point, there are 3 stages to an investigation. The first stage is vehicle in motion. Second stage is personal contact. And the third stage is the pre-arrest investigation. Now the vehicle in motion is exactly what it sounds like. They might stay behind the vehicle looking for signs that the person is intoxicated. If they're swerving, they break across the double yellow line, if they speed, there's a lot of things that they might be looking for. Now, I don't recommend anybody drink while driving, obviously, but if you've had one drink and there's an officer behind you and he's following, it's probably not your imagination. He's probably following you and looking for clues that you're intoxicated. So don't drink and drive, but always be careful and always follow traffic law. The second part of the investigation is personal contact. This is when the police officer has already pulled you over and has come up to your car and is asking your name, where you're coming from, where you're going, how much did you have to drink tonight. These are all part of the initial part of the investigation before the pre-arrest investigation. Technically, the officer should not have made the decision that he's going to make an arrest at this point, although I've seen a lot of these investigations and a lot of times they've made that determination even before they've stepped up to the car. But technically they haven't made that decision yet. They're asking you questions. They're looking for signs that you're intoxicated. Are you slurring your words? Did you admit to drinking, just 1 beer 3 hours ago? Even that can be a sign of intoxication, even though we all know that 1 beer 3 hours ago does not mean that you are intoxicated. Now, I know a lot of you are looking at this video after the fact, but the truth is the best thing to do at this personal contact phase is to not answer any questions, politely decline. You might get arrested anyway, but anything you say is going to be on camera. It could be played to a jury later. The best thing to do is to just not answer questions. And that's, in general, the best way to handle the police in almost every situation. Now, following the personal contact phase, it's going to be the pre-arrest investigation phase. And this is the thing that you've probably seen in movies and TV shows. It's the field sobriety tests. That's the main crux of it. The first field sobriety test they're going to do is the horizontal gaze nystagmus test. It's where they take a pen, have you follow it. What they're looking for is a jitteriness with your, is jitteriness a word? I'm not sure. But they're looking for your pupils to go back and forth in a jittery manner. And that's nystagmus. It only happens when you've had alcohol or certain drugs. Some people have it just in their natural state. Obviously that's something to think about. But for most people, it only happens after you're intoxicated. So they're not actually seeing, can you track the pen? Some people think, hey, I tracked the pen with my eyes. I did that okay. That's not what they're looking at. They're really just looking at the pupil and how it moves as it goes back and forth. The second test is the walk and turn. Now, this is one that you're gonna almost definitely fail even if you're sober. Why? Because the instructions are ridiculous and nobody's really listening to the instructions. Everybody just hears, oh, they want me to walk in a straight line. I can do that. And they walk in a straight line. But the police are asking you to do it heel to toe for exactly 9 steps. And then they tell you this weird little pirouette that you have to do at the end and turn back and come around. And if you don't follow those directions exactly, those are all going to be clues that you're intoxicated. And they only really need to come up with 2 clues for it to be, in their mind, probable cause that you're intoxicated. So the walk and turn, you're really set up to fail. Even if you can walk a straight line, I would recommend refusing to do it. And this kind of brings me to a point that maybe I could have mentioned earlier, but you can refuse these field sobriety tests. The officers frame it as a way that you need to do these, and basically you do need to do them or you're going to be arrested. But the truth is, once you've gotten to this phase of the investigation, you're 80-90% chance going to be arrested no matter what. Your best bet is to go ahead and politely refuse to do the tests. Go ahead and get booked in, fight it in court, because all you're doing with these tests are giving the prosecutor fodder in court when they present to a jury that this person's intoxicated because look, they missed a step on the walk and turn. It's a test that's set up for you to fail, and your best bet is to refuse. And the third test that's very common is the one leg stand, where the officer has you put your hands at your side, lift one foot, put your gaze down, and then the officer will time you. And they won't tell you how long. It's usually for 30 seconds, but they'll just say, keep doing it until I say stop. And so you're standing there with your leg up, and we naturally tend to put our arms out to use our balance. If you do that during the test, that's a clue you're intoxicated. That doesn't seem fair to me, but that's what the officers do, and they will use that against you in court. So again, just like the other two tests, the best thing to do is to politely refuse. And the last test, which seems to be becoming more common here in Travis County, is the Romberg balance test. In this test, the officer has you put your arms out and tilt your head back and estimate 30 seconds. Now keep in mind, on the other tests, the officer was keeping track of the time. This one, he asks you to keep track of the time. And if you just assume or you mishear the officer and you think that the officer is going to count up to the 30 seconds, guess what? That's a clue you're intoxicated. Again, all these tests are kind of setting you up to fail. The best thing to do is to refuse these tests. All right, and you may be thinking to yourself, oh, this is great advice to refuse these tests, but when I was, on the side of the road, I got commanded by the officer, I went ahead and did them, they have it on video. Well, that's something we can deal with. As your attorney, it's my job to look at that video and pick it apart and look at the areas where you do look intoxicated, or maybe the areas where the officer is just assuming things and you're not really intoxicated based on that video. The standard field sobriety tests almost never help your case because they're designed by the police to help the police's case and the prosecution's case, but we can still pick it apart, look at the weaknesses, the strengths, where you did well in the video, highlight that. So it's not the end of the world, but it really is best if there's no field sobriety tests that were recorded on camera. Now, at the end of the field sobriety test is usually when the officer will come and offer a blood alcohol test. It's a breathalyzer, you blow into it. If you're over 0.08, that is a statutory level of intoxication, meaning they don't have to show you are intoxicated by your mannerisms or anything else if you're over 0.08. If you're over 0.15, it actually bumps it up from a Class B misdemeanor to a Class A misdemeanor. Now, they can still arrest you for DWI even if it's below 0.08, and sometimes they'll have made the decision to arrest even before you have that breathalyzer. So the best thing to do, it's a common theme that I've mentioned several times, but go ahead and refuse. If you refuse, they will warn you that your driver's license will likely be suspended. And you know what? They're actually right about that. It probably will, but your best bet is still usually to refuse if you've had any alcohol. If you've had no alcohol that day, it is okay to go ahead and blow into the test. There are false positives, but they are pretty rare. And so if you've had zero alcohol that day, I think it's okay to go ahead and blow. If you've had even one drink within the last few hours, I would say go ahead and avoid it and let the police do what they need to do to get a warrant and do a blood draw. And that brings me to the next thing, which is blood warrants. So if you do refuse the breathalyzer, the police are going to warn you, hey, look, not only are you going to lose your license, but we're going to go get a warrant from a judge and get a blood draw. And sometimes they will. It used to be basically 24 hours a day in Travis County. Nowadays, they have magistrates ready on the weekends usually, but it's not 24-hour coverage anymore. So sometimes if you refuse the breathalyzer, they're going to warn you, hey, we're going to go get a blood warrant, but then they don't have a magistrate on duty to get a blood warrant, or they don't have a phlebotomist on duty that can do the blood draw, and so you'll be booked in and arrested. It won't save you from being arrested, but you won't have that blood test or that breathalyzer on file to help them convict you. The other thing to consider is that blood alcohol content is constantly going up or down. Now, they have to show that you were intoxicated at the time you were driving, so if they have to wait 2 to 3 hours to get a blood draw, then A, that weakens the link between the blood alcohol at the time that the blood was taken versus when you were driving. But also, over that time, over that 3 hours, your blood alcohol could come down. If it drops down below 0.08, or if it goes from 0.15 to 0.12, that can really help your case in a lot of different ways. So even if they go ahead and decide to get a blood warrant to draw your blood, it's still best to refuse the breathalyzer. Now, one last thing to keep in mind through this whole process, there is a body camera, there is dash cam. When you're in the police vehicle, there's a camera facing you. your behavior can be scrutinized through the whole process. So if you get into the car and you're screaming and yelling at the police officers, that's going to be a very bad look, not only for making it seem like you're intoxicated, but it's going to make the prosecutors less likely to want to give you a nice sweetheart deal later if they see that you're acting like a fool in the back of the car. So through the whole process, not just when they're asking you questions, but even when you're sitting in the police vehicle by yourself while they're filling out paperwork somewhere else, keep in mind that camera is always on you. Now, if you're looking at this video after you've been charged, the thing to kind of keep in mind is think back to your arrest. How did you behave? How did you do on those tests? If you did take them or if you refused them, did you refuse the blood alcohol? Just think about all these things, and each one of those, there's like a continuum, right? So if you did really bad on the BAC test, that's one strike against you. If you took the BAC test and it was barely over 0.08, that could actually be okay. Or if you refused the BAC test and they didn't get your blood, you know that the state's case is a little bit weaker. So that's why I went over the factors involved in a DWI arrest. It's so that you could think about that in terms of your case. I definitely don't want to encourage people to go out and drink and drive and then say, oh, well, I can maintain my lane, so I'm not going to get pulled over. That's not the point of this video. The main point is to think about your own arrest and how the police conducted that investigation. You can kind of think, is my case more on the severe side, or is it more on the mild side based on the things that the police were looking at? None of this is legal advice, but if you do want legal advice, you can visit us at atx.legal. There's also a number of other videos in this series if you click on my YouTube channel.